But it's great to meet you. Thank you for taking a minute. I love your story. I love getting into the podcasting mind, the entrepreneur mind, all of the good stuff. So thank you for taking a minute out.
Thank you for the invite.
You bet. So before we get into your work, I want to
Yeah.
know, 4 years ago, this pandemic was raging. No one knew how we were going to get out of it. It was
Mm.
really momentous, globally impactful. How did you get through that time period, and how did it ultimately change the way that you approach life?
Mm. Well, I think that was one of the interesting parts about the pandemic is it caused a lot of people to reevaluate what they were doing.
Yeah.
And in any situation, doesn't matter whether it's a pandemic, the Great Depression, there are people that do well and those that don't. And we can get into reasons why later on if you like. But what happened was I've been a lifelong, after a banking career, lifelong entrepreneur. And I was heavily involved in the self-storage industry at the time. And so the question then became immediately, okay, how can I still stay open, serve our customers, keep our staff and customers safe? And we had been up until that point a facility that was open basically 8 to 8 every day. And so that's a lot of staffing. And what I had to do to make things work is cut back the office hours from 9 to 5. And then after the pandemic sort of subsided, because I made some changes to make it happen for us to be able to stay open. But then as things started to go back to normal, I thought I'm kind of digging this 9 to 5. It's real, it's way easier to schedule than 8 to 8. So then the question becomes, okay, well, how can we make that work? And it involves more security cameras and gates and that type of thing. What I did not know as I was doing all this is that I was making it more attractive to a buyer. And so after about 18 years of saying no to a number of people that came up and did want to buy it, we had a really serious buyer and thought, maybe now's the time. And so ended up selling it. So that was a turning point for me. That was a big one. Yeah, it was 18 years when we sold it at that point.
So right now in 2024, if I put you in front of a bunch of third grade students at career day and one of the kids says, "Hey, what do you do for a living?" What's your answer?
Ooh, that's a great question. Hmm. Ultimately, I help people understand the connection between the way they think and the results that they get in their life. So those 3-year-olds, I'd say, think about what it is that you really like to have, do, or be. If you could do anything in the world without giving it any consideration as to how you'd pull it off, what would you really like to do with your life? And don't let anybody tell you you can't do it. That would be my message.
So what did you want to be in the third grade? What was your dream?
Let's see. I remember wanting to be an accountant. I love number crunching to this day.
Yeah.
A veterinarian, horse, cow doctor, which I'm riding and loving horses to this day. Yeah.
So you basically ended up doing exactly what you love. You were the youngest bank manager at 22. So talk to me a little bit about some of these foundational seeds that were planted into you, where you were
Mm.
born and raised, and how all of that kind of evolved and grew into not only being the youngest bank manager, but becoming a seasoned entrepreneur. How did all that happen?
I grew up with, I was born with introverted tendencies and was raised by a very loving but stay in the background, not speak up kind of mom. And being in front of any sort of group just terrified me. So even thinking what I am doing today in front of audiences would have just been inconceivable. But what happened was when I was about 18, 19 years old, friends of mine said, there's a seminar occurring, Joan. You should go. Now, they told me it was on business matters, predominantly marketing. I think they said that so that I would go, which I did. And oh gosh, I remember it to this day. There was about 300 of us in the room, and I was seated about 3 rows back, 2 seats in. And for 2 hours, I was totally captivated by what I was hearing. Because what this person was talking about, it wasn't marketing, but what he was talking about was your mind and your potential. And he said, regardless of what's happened in the past, regardless of what you think your limitations are, he said, the truth is you could create anything you want in your life. And I'm like, what? No way. That's not it. And certainly really trying to bring me out of my wallflower mentality and be outgoing and like, there's no way. But as I continued to study what this man was talking about and ended up working with him, I began to believe and understand that what he was saying was true. And it wasn't just true for me, it was true for anybody.
Yeah.
But the real key is being open enough to at least explore these ideas and think, okay, maybe the concepts that I grew up with, maybe they weren't all true. Maybe
Right.
some of them have been really helpful, but maybe there's some that I'm ready to ditch.
So who's been that hero, inspiration?
Bob Proctor was the first.
Yeah. I didn't mean to
He's
interrupt your thought. I'm sorry.
Yeah, yeah, no,
Did
no,
you have another thought? No, go ahead.
yeah, no, no. I was going to say he was definitely the first one, and then from there were a string of teachers.
So, if you can meet anybody alive on the planet right now that you find inspirational,
Mm.
that would totally you could get something from them or ask them questions, who would that be? Who would you love to meet?
Well, Bob passed away a couple of years ago, so that disqualified him. But as he would say, he's still right next door. You know what? I'm going to say Taylor Swift
Okay.
because of the so many facets of her. Like when you watch her career and what she's dealt with and her uh, ability to grow community, that's amazing. And of course, her talent, but also her business acumen, standing up for what she believes in. Yeah, there's so many things that I respect
It
about her.
it's strange being in Kansas City that she's become synonymous with this town now.
Oh,
Like,
really?
yeah, well, yeah, I mean, because there she's coming to all the games and people are seeing her,
Oh,
and
of course.
there's all these articles. If you want to go here, and it's like, I don't think people understand that there's an entourage and a way that these people that she's one of the most famous people on the planet travel and do. Like,
Yeah.
it's not like a regular person, you know.
Right.
So,
Yes. Yes.
um, so let me ask you this. Every day you wake up, you're giving of yourself to others and helping them get to another place. But at the end of the day, you have to hold back and you have to develop and evolve as a human being yourself. What is
Mm-hmm.
that collective gumption every day for you to wake up, to be motivated, and to do all of these things that create a successful existence?
Part of it is knowing that there's always something to learn. As we go along, we develop this skill set and this knowledge base, but there's so many things out there that I haven't explored and don't know. And that's one of the beautiful things about having a podcast. And I'm sure you've experienced this, Joe, too. I mean, some of the people that come on your show, you're thinking, oh man, this was really awesome. And I learned something today. And you learn something new, or oftentimes it reminds you of something,
Yep.
or somebody will say something and it's like, huh, yeah, I should be doing that and I'm not doing enough of it. So it's a nice reminder because we're all creatures of habit, and it takes sometimes hearing an idea over and over again until we actually act on it. And one of those things, really quickly, was the concept of writing down the top three things you have to do tomorrow and then work on those in priority order. It's such a simple concept. And I knew about it intellectually, but that's not the part of the mind that drives behavior.
Yeah.
And I remember listening to it for, I don't know, maybe from the 10th time I heard somebody say it. And it just dawned on me. It's like, Joan, suck it up, do it, commit to it. And after doing it for about 30 days, it's like, oh my God, this tip is so productive. Yeah.
Well, it's kind of like that habit thing. Like after 90 days, it just becomes a part of what you do. Once you buy in and it's something that you want to do. Um, but those podcast revelations are so essential too. I remember
Mhm.
the first time I really, so I have a jazz radio show, and the first time I interviewed my huge A-list person, which was
Wow.
Sonny Rollins, I called my engineer at my show and I said, "Oh my God, I just talked to Sonny Rollins," and I was just bouncing off the walls because the thing about jazz, real upper echelon jazz musicians that I don't think a lot of people understand is they're some of the best pedigree on this planet,
Mm.
and they are so kind, they are so humble, they're so intelligent. They're like all of those Jedis in Cloud City and Empire Strikes Back. They just exist on a different plane. They have this
Yeah.
different level of energy. But I remember him telling me very clearly, and this plays into the podcasting principle, that that when you interview somebody, they will get from you what you give to them. There's this
Mm.
two-way exchange. And
Hmm.
and it just stopped me in my tracks because I'm just thinking, I'm just some guy. I'm just interviewing. I'm just trying to get something out of them, and I want to present that to an audience. But it
Hmm.
is a human connection. There is this two-way avenue that goes on, and it just really dawned on me. And that's the beauty of this realm of podcasting. When people do say things to you, you're like, wow, it's revelatory.
Yes, yes. And I know what you mean about that connection. My most recent one was, believe it or not, somebody whose specialty is in robotic surgery technologies.
Yeah. Yeah.
He's got two doctorates, three masters, and it was a really interesting segment.
Yeah.
But yeah, and the guests are diverse again, like your show too. Apart from
Yeah.
the jazz side that you do, yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, as an entrepreneur, I'm curious, the thing that's always fascinated me with entrepreneurship is this idea of embracing failure. And it seems like a misnomer, but it's true because that's your evolutionary step that you have to take, being an entrepreneur to succeed.
Mhm.
What was that time in your life where you learned the most, whether it was a failure or it was trying and you really learned something or you got to a place you didn't think you were going to get to? What was that growth period in your career?
Mm. What pops into mind is breaking through the terror barrier. And what I mean by that is we each have our own comfort zones. We do what we do day in and day out. We may or may not be getting the results that we want, but it's comfortable. And suddenly you set a goal for something that you'd really like to achieve, but chances are you haven't achieved it because there's something that is required of you that you're fearful of. Fear of failure, fear of I just can't do it or I don't know how. But when something clicks and you decide to go for it, and it then the question doesn't become can I? It's like, okay, how I can. And we make that mental shift and we do it. It may scare the crap out of us, but then once we do it, it's like, okay, I survived that. I could do this. Maybe I didn't do it very well, but I did it and I could keep improving on it.
Yeah.
And for me, the memory that pops up is I was so enamored and could see the results of applying what I was learning first from Bob Proctor and then, as the years went on. And I knew that it wasn't just me, that anybody could do this because I was seeing results in other people. It was, okay, now I really want to communicate this, but how the hell do I do that when I can't stand up in front of people?
Yeah.
But then again, through what I was learning, see, we learn from essentially two methods. One is through repetition, hearing and seeing things over and over again. And the other is impactful when something really impactful happens. So that's all the conditioning part. But there's also the genetic. So for me, I mentioned to you about my mom being very shy and introverted. And so that's the genetic part of me. But then there's also the conditioning. And so her and I, when I was very young, could walk into a room and she would be very upset by it, like not happy about it. Of course, that's going to transmit to me. Now, so that's what I'm picking up is making that association between large groups and feeling uncomfortable. Now, let's be clear though, this is not the blame game.
Right.
A person can't give you something they don't have. She could
Yeah.
not give me the feeling of confidence if she didn't have it. However, what I realized was, oh, okay, I see where that came from now. Now, if I want to change, if I want a different result, I got to change. So that first group I walked into was 18 people. It felt like 18,000, Joe, I swear to God.
Yeah.
I had to like push myself from the back to get in there. But it's like, okay, the world didn't end. I survived this. And at least I got to do it. And I really love this material. And you just got to practice and practice. In fact, the first guest I ever had on my podcast, uh, in fact, I believe the title was Be Willing to Fail. And he said, you got to be willing to fail in public. It's fine
Yeah.
if you want to be a singer and you're singing in the shower at home, but you need to get out there and get on a stage. And
Yeah.
that's so true.
I think about that with comedians because I think that
Oh, perfect.
requires
Yeah.
the biggest level of gall to go up and try something and know that there's just things that aren't going to. I remember one time
Mhm.
I went into an interview and I thought there was and the HR person was just a really small person, like maybe 4'11", something like that. She just waving me into a room and I come in and the entire room is full all the way around. And then I just sit right there at the head and it's like, okay, let's go. And but I really did like try to learn up on the organization and all of that.
Mhm.
But those are the moments where it's like, you're on. What do
Yeah.
you got? You
Yeah,
know,
exactly.
you got
Yeah.
it. You got
And
to
you learn
figure it out.
from it. And you
Yeah,
say, you know what? I really liked this, this, this. And you know what? In the future, I could have nailed it better if I had done this. So
right.
it's a learning experience.
Certainly
You
is.
you do something, doesn't matter what it is, and you get a result. You get data or data, depending on what country you're in.
Yeah.
And then you're smarter. You got that little bit more of information.
Yeah.
And another guest I had on, Annalisa DeMarta, she's a pro in selling on Amazon.
Yeah.
Her mantra, and I just love it. She said, risk a little and learn a lot.
Wow.
Like, oh, that is so true. That is so
That
powerful. Whether it's your time investment, money investment, risk a little, learn a lot.
yeah. So of all of these things that you've accomplished and evolved into in your life, what are you the proudest of?
When someone pulls me aside, and this happened fairly recently, this woman said, I was going to send you an email, but I wanted to tell you in person, and I knew that you were coming to speak, blah, blah, blah. And she said, here, sit down. She was quite forceful. I want to tell you what happened since your seminar. And she was telling me how became financially free, landed this dream job, that kind of thing. And so those are the moments that,
Yeah.
that and the other moments is when you're talking to someone and the light bulb goes on. It's like the third grader that thinks I can't do that, or 30 or 50-year-old, doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Uh, and then you're having this conversation and they're like, huh, well, I could do this. And then that's one step towards their goal. And they start thinking of how. That's the whole shift, is
Yeah.
from, if a person is locked into I can't, it's a done deal. You can't.
Yeah.
But if they're just open up to how I could, the possibilities are endless. Especially these days. You mentioned the beginning of the conversation about the pandemic. I mean, look at the innovation in communication and ability to work from home. Another one of my guests, he's a trademark attorney. Now, when I think of trademark attorney, I think of some person holed up in an office building.
Yeah.
Not him. He's a digital nomad. He was in 8 countries last year.
Wow.
All he needs is a laptop and a strong
That's it.
internet connection. So you can reimagine just about any job these days.
It's interesting. I've run into way more nomads than I ever thought I would, and they're just going around and they have the latitude to do it, you
Yeah.
know? So let me ask you this. If you had a dream tonight, you ran into, say, an 18-year-old version of you, and you could give that young version of you a piece of advice based on this life you've lived, the wisdom you've gained along the way, what
Mm.
advice would you impart, and would that version of you listen?
Would it listen? Probably not.
Right?
What I would tell it is go for it. You've got more possibility within you than you even imagine, more talent, more potential. And I'm speaking to everyone here, just not myself. And go for it. Because as I mentioned earlier, you'll act, you'll have a result, but you'll be so much further ahead than everybody else because you act. As you know, the name of my podcast is Side Hustle Hero. And the
Yeah.
number one cause of people not having a successful side hustle is not even starting in the beginning. It's just that getting started. It's like, stop the research, stop the talking about it, just do it. But I know I didn't have the confidence to do that back then. And for that 18-year-old, and I tell them this now, and I wish I had, it would have been nice to have recognized this later, is having a show like you've got, like, say you want to become really involved in the music scene, in jazz. What better way to do a podcast on that and interview all these wonderful people? You're developing connections,
Yeah.
you're learning from them. So I would say anybody that wants to get involved in any industry is do something where you can, I don't know, write a blog and you're interviewing the top 10 people. Say you want to be an interior designer,
Yeah.
seek out those designers and tell them you're going to feature them, and blah blah blah. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I had a guy call me a few months ago or 3 months ago, and he was trying to offer me some small business loan. So we started talking, and I told him what I did with podcasting and all of that. He was really interested in it, and I could tell he was going off script, and he didn't mean to. And he said, I've always wanted to start a podcast myself, but I need to get a studio and do this, that, and the other. I said, no, 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 no. I said, stop with this whole you need the most expensive microphone and headphones and all of this stuff. If you have an idea, just do it. The first season of Seinfeld was not good. It was clunky.
Mm.
It was weird. It was just not really flowing until it got going. So everything has a gestation period. Everything needs to find its way. And we got probably 10 minutes into it, and this guy was like, wow, I was supposed to call you up and pitch you something. And you and I totally turned the tables on this kid. But he was a kid, and I think he left, and hopefully he went out and did it. But it's those things where it's like there's this perception that you have to have everything perfect before you do it.
And if I
And you
just
don't.
want to add to that, if he's, and it sounds like he's been thinking of, in fact, you said that, didn't you? You'd been thinking about it
Yeah.
for a while.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's just it. You could be at the point where I really want to do this. I don't have a clue how I'm going to do it. But if you're thinking about it and you see yourself doing it, what happens is you end up, oh, I'm going to see this client to sell him this loan. But it turns out that was part of the plan. That was the next step, is running into you.
Yeah,
And suddenly he's got these ideas on how he could do it.
absolutely.
That's actually how I got involved in the self-storage facility industry as well. Is I learned about it, realized it was a perfect fit, didn't have a clue about it, and ended up being a party. And a friend of a friend introduced me to somebody, and as we started talking, I realized he had a whole portfolio of storage facilities. And it was like, wow, okay, so here's my mentor that I met at this party that I would have never run into otherwise.
It's
So
amazing.
because you can't see how it's done, that's not proof that you can't. If you can see yourself in your mind's eye already doing it, that's all the proof that you need. And just
And that
be
and
open
that
to it.
yeah, and that's what the jazz musicians have taught me, the art of improv, because that's what life
Oh,
is,
yeah.
you know? So at the end of the day, Joan, everyone has a perception of you. You got family, friends, everyone that knows you as an entrepreneur, as a podcaster, everyone around you, but you run the show. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
I think at this age and this background, I feel like I'm just starting. Yeah,
Yeah.
I've got so much to learn yet. I've got a whole other journey ahead of me that I don't quite know what it looks like. I've got the sort of the broad strokes picture there, but from recent years, the whole business side is meshing with the personal development side, and I'm really excited for the future.
So Side Hustle Hero, if anyone wants to listen to the podcast, reach out to you for your sage wisdom. Any of the good business in your world, where do they go?
SideHustleHero.com is where everything lives.
Okay. This has been wonderful, Joan. It's so great to run into you. Thank you so much for your story. Thank you for your time. Keep putting out the great work.
Thank you so much for having me, Joe. It's been my pleasure.
Absolutely.